Welcome to Working Mama, the podcast for women navigating the juggle of career and motherhood. If you're returning to work after maternity leave, trying to figure out how to make all of this work, or just need someone to say out loud what you've been thinking, you're in the right place. So glad you're here. Whether you're a regular listener or this is your first time, let's get into today's amazing episode. I've sat down with Dr. Anne Welsh, a clinical psychologist, executive coach, and mum of four, who spends her days helping working mothers and women in leadership actually enjoy the lives they've worked so hard to build. She's also spent the last 20 years researching the transition into motherhood, and she's got a book coming out on the tension so many of us feel between ambition and motherhood, and why we've been taught that those two words don't belong in the same sentence. In this conversation, we get into why the escalation of modern motherhood means we're being asked to do more than any generation before us, why the mental load isn't just about remembering appointments, and it's about quality over quantity when it comes to time with your kids. And also walks us through a simple exercise to help you figure out who you are now that you're a mum, and why naming what you actually want is one of the most radical things you can do. If you've ever felt like you have to choose between being a good mum and having a real career, this episode is your permission slip. Let's get into it with Anne. Welcome, Anne, to the Working Mama podcast. How has your day been? Because I know we're recording this. You're in America. I'm in Australia.
I was going to say, right? I have not started my work week yet. We're more in the prep everybody for the chaos that is Monday, because it's a Sunday evening here, which with 4 kids, teenagers, we're going into our last week of school, is very chaotic. But, you know, I'm excited to be here and outside of the chaos for the next hour.
Yeah.
Right.
So, Anne, you've got 4 boys. You're a psychologist. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I have 4 kids. My youngest is a girl. So I've got right now 17, 15, 12, and 10-year-old. And then in my non-mom side of life, I'm a clinical psychologist, and I specialize in maternal mental health, but I am also an executive coach. And in that work, I specialize in working with working mothers and women in leadership. And so there's a lot of overlap between everything that I do. And really at the heart of it is helping women enjoy the lives they've worked so hard to build, from lots of different angles.
Yeah, so good. Now, can you take me back to a moment, either in your own life or when you've been sitting with a client, where you thought something is fundamentally broken with the way that we talk about motherhood and ambition?
You know, it's funny. I think there was a lot of it kind of circulating in my head, but prior to this, but the moment it really became clear was when I had my 3rd kid, and I had a private practice, and my husband was traveling a lot for work. And I remember this evening that I was standing in my kitchen trying to make dinner, and my baby was probably 1, a little younger. He never wanted to be put down. So I was like one-handed cooking while trying to hold this baby. And I had a 2 and a 4-year-old in the other room watching TV, trying to keep them sitting still while I cooked. My husband was not in town, and I was really struggling. And I, was close to tears, and I called my mom, because my mom was a working mom of 4 kids as well. So she was a doctor. She had 4 children, slightly larger age spread than mine, but she had done it. And I remember thinking she had kind of made it look easy. So I called her and I said, Mom, I don't understand. How did you do it? Like, I feel like I am drowning. And her response at the time was, I don't know, Anne, it just wasn't that hard. Which was like,
and that's really helpful at the time. Yeah.
Right. The worst thing to say. And I kind of mumbled something and hung up, and I just started sobbing, like literally sitting on the floor of my kitchen with the baby sobbing, because I thought, well, okay, that just says it must be me, right? I just must be screwing this up all the time. And I got through the evening, I made dinner, I got the kids in bed, and then I was like, I don't know, something made me call my mom back in that moment. And I think I already had some internal knowing by then. And I said, Mom, that really hurt my feelings. Why did you say that? And she said, well, that's not what I meant at all. I'm so sorry. I meant that I had all sorts of help. We had a full-time babysitter and people to clean the house, and both sets of grandparents lived nearby, and my dad was super involved and never traveled for work, right? And so she started to articulate more of what she meant, which was it wasn't as hard as what I'm trying to do, because she had a system behind her and she had people and support, and it was different. And I think she also acknowledged that what we're asking moms to do now is radically different than what we were asking mothers in the 80s to do.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was the moment where I was like, yeah, it's not me. This is not that I'm just incapable. There's a lot happening here. And that's when I got really curious about it and kind of started doing the research and trying to figure out how can I start to affect change, sure, still at the individual level, but also what can I do on that systems level? How can I attack that problem too?
And so why do you think there is such difference between the way that your mum had it and the way that we had it? By the sounds of it, she had a great system around her. Why do you think there's been such difference in the generation?
So, I mean, a couple of things. One is, and I'll certainly be the first to say, I don't think my mom had it easy, right? I mean, some of the stories she has about being a woman in medicine at the time that she was practicing were pretty atrocious, right? And so she was really a trailblazer. But what I will say is, I write in my book about something I call the escalation of modern motherhood. And I have really seen, especially in the last 10 years, but really over the last 20, where as women succeed more at work, we keep upping the ante of what we're asking them to do at home. And so, there's some great data. Women who were at-home mothers in the 1970s spent less time with their children than working mothers do now. Right? The expectations for play, for entertainment, for emotional regulation, for structure, for all of these things were not there at the time. And so we've really increased what we're asking mothers to do in terms of spending time with their children, in terms of the emotional management of our children's lives, the logistical management of our children's lives, and all of the mental load. And I think the other thing that has really escalated it is that work has also become more of a 24/7 phenomenon, right? So mother is asking us more, or asking more of us, but also with remote work options, we don't have the same boundaries. When we're not at work, we're still super accessible, and work expects that of us. And so we're constantly being pulled in these two directions. And I see what is happening is that women are essentially becoming transparent in their own lives because they're trying to stretch themselves so thin between these two things. And that, it's like that double-edged sword is really what's making it kind of feel like a fever pitch these days.
Yeah, that's so true. There's so much of that blurred lines, and we talk about boundary setting, but there's boundaries where, you can still log on at night, you can still remote access. So it's probably the rise of technology making us more accessible has actually then at times had a negative impact on our work life, I would say integration. I hate the word balance, but just the way obviously we run our lives. There's no, right, I leave the office, mentally switch off, now I'm in mum mode.
You can be getting a Teams message or a Slack message at 9:00 at night. You can, and in some ways it's helpful, right, to be able to kind of integrate the two, but it does mean that we're constantly in two places at once in a way that maybe we didn't used to be historically.
So how do we navigate it? And because it's always one of the big questions of, well, women want to go, well, I want to be able to have a career and I want to be a mum. And obviously technology is allowing us with flexible work and remote work and the like. But as you were saying, the lines get blurred and things. But what's some of the solutions of what you're talking about?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things that I see, sometimes we're told that the solution either is just set boundaries, which is helpful to an extent, right? But we have to be really more nuanced about the boundaries piece,
I agree.
Right? Because who are we setting the boundaries with? Different workplaces are going to have different responses to that, right? So that is given as a simple solution that doesn't always work. I'm also hear the solution of, well, just step back or quit or, leave your ambition behind. And that's just really another way of keeping women small, right? As opposed to saying maybe there are systemic things we can change to make it easier. But in terms of what women themselves can do, one of the things I see consistently happening is that they try to solve this problem, right? I talked about getting really transparent in their own lives. They essentially say, well, I'll just give all of my time to work and to my kids, and I will remove myself from the equation. And that's the thing that's making us miserable, right? Because we're not paying attention to any of our own wants or needs or desires. And it's not actually solving the problem in the end, right? Because even if you take yourself out, work will just ask more of you. And your kids will just ask more of you, right? There is no end to the to-do list. The only reward for getting through the to-do list is another to-do list. And so when we try to solve the problem by saying, well, my needs don't matter, we just end up feeling really disconnected. We feel burnt out, we feel lonely, we feel numb. I have a lot of women who come into my office and who say things like, I have everything I thought I wanted and I'm utterly miserable, or I'm not happy and I don't understand why. And it's because they never actually checked, well, do I actually want these things? Yeah. And that's the shift, right? The shift is, am I going after these things because I'm trying to be a people pleaser? I'm trying to achieve a goal that someone else set out for me because I think this is what I'm supposed to do? Versus, am I going after these things because I truly, genuinely want them and it's part of a larger picture goal for me? And so that's the shift that I want women to make, right? Is stopping to ask, where am I in all of this? What do I actually want?
Yeah. That's a huge question, because I think as mums, so much of, I guess, what's ingrained in us is caring and supporting others, as what you say, you know, between work and life, our partner, our kids, we're so, I guess, programmed to think about everyone else. And then if we turn the mirror around ourselves and say, what do we want? I'm sure that many women listening to this will be going and pausing, going, I don't know. And it's probably going, this is quite a big, it might sound very simple question, but it's a really hard question, no doubt, to answer articulately.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I kind of say that for a woman to ask herself what she wants is a really radical, revolutionary act, because from the minute we're born, we're told that that is irrelevant, right? We are told to be good girls and to make everybody else happy. And then you layer on top of that motherhood. And a lot of times we essentially equate motherhood with martyrdom, right? And completely foregoing your sense of self. By the time we become parents, we've had, 30, 40 years of ignoring our needs under our belt. And it's like an atrophied muscle, right? Where you haven't used it in so long, you don't even know how to. And so I suggest kind of one of two things. One is like, what can you name that you want? Like, what's the 1 pound weight you can lift in terms of exercising that muscle, right? Maybe we start with, what do you want for dinner? Or what shirt do you want to wear this morning? Like, really tiny questions just to get used to expressing a want. And maybe at first you don't even feel comfortable asking for it, but you just express it. But the other way that women can approach this question, if it feels hard, is to do what I call notice the breadcrumbs of joy in your life. So what are the teeny tiny moments that are things that you enjoy doing? And can you learn to start paying more attention to those? And those might be trail markers to a bigger one. So as an example for that, long before I started writing a book, I just ended up like, I had sentences almost like bubbling up in my head, or I started writing a little bit here and there, or, thinking about, well, if I were to write an article, this is what it would be, or even just doing some journaling. And I really was enjoying that. And I hadn't done any writing since I had my second kid, for sure. I'd done academic writing prior to that. And I started thinking, oh, this is fun. I kind of like this. Let me do more of this. And slowly that blossomed into a book. But it wasn't like I knew from the beginning, oh, I'm going to write a book. In fact, the book felt way too far when I was first doing it. I really had to do this like breadcrumb piece by piece to name, oh, this is what I want to do next.
I think it's such a good way of actually saying the breadcrumbs. It really shows, because, if we try and, as they say, what is the saying around eat an elephant, you got to do it one bite at a time. Like if you try and eat it all at once, it's going to be really difficult. I actually had the same epiphany recently. I had my birthday and I had these things of going, well, I've probably got about maybe 20, 25 years, before, retirement and things like that. What is it what I want to do? And I actually I went out, bought myself a book made myself a coffee and actually sat down, and I was then listing out, like, it was really interesting because a lot of it related back into travel and what I wanted to do and different activities. But it was really, I have to say, cathartic to actually get these things out of my head, but and I deliberately put it on paper and actually saying and naming it of, look, this is what I would like to do. And not necessarily it's about who am I and, what is my goals, but it was like, look, if I've got things that I want to do with my family, what does it look like? And I have to say, it was a really empowering process as well.
I love so many things about that. I mean, one is, to your point of putting it on paper, right? Our brains actually work differently when we're writing physically with a pen and paper than typing on a keyboard or speaking, right? These are all different pathways. So sometimes writing can help us get at things that we didn't know were there. Like you can kind of surprise yourself sometimes when you're writing, like, oh, I want this thing. I didn't know that. But also making a list is a great way to do it too, because if you give yourself that open space, you get through the superficial stuff, and sometimes you can get at some of the deeper things that way as well.
Yeah. And so you talk about ambition in motherhood. What is being ambitious? And as what you said, often, women are put down and not probably empowered enough or even got the thought process that we are allowed to be ambitious. Of course, when a man becomes a father, it's like, the fatherhood bonus, and then you often get the motherhood penalty. How do we define, ambition?
So two things that I want to say, first to your point, right? When men become fathers, they get permission to be more ambitious and perhaps financially to, quote, take care of the family. But there is this sense of fatherhood and ambition are things we can hold together very easily as a culture. Motherhood and ambition, we do not hold together. And not only that, if a woman is ambitious, it's not always seen as a good thing. And if a mother is ambitious, it's seen as hurting her children, right? That there's this idea that if your ambition is if you are ambitious, you are somehow leaving your children behind, you are abandoning them. We have all sorts of negative language. It's just a funny side note on motherhood and ambition. It was actually really important to me to have those two words together in the book title. And when I was designing the cover, I had the cover as it was, and it said Ambitious Mother. And I just wanted to play with different font colors. So I stuck it into AI and I said, can you show me what this would look like in green instead of red or whatever it was? And the AI changed it to Ambitious Father.
Wow.
I only asked it to change the color, but I think there's something, to me, it spoke so much to how foreign it is to pair these words together. And I really find it important to be talking about them as a pair, to give women permission to be ambitious when they are also mothers. But I think part of it is that we also have to expand our definition of ambition when we're talking about motherhood, because the classic definition of ambition, we're talking about a ladder. That's the classic model, right? And with the ladder model of ambition, you climb one rung after the other until you get to the top. It's very narrow. It really only leaves room to be ambitious for power, money, status. And if you're not actively climbing, you have failed, right? You have fallen off.
You're not seen as ambitious.
Exactly. A classic example of that is, a big law firm or a private equity where it's kind of this up or out culture. So either you make the next ring or rung, or you fall off the ladder and you have to leave, right? And I really advocate that we think about ambition as a web. And with the web of ambition, right, you kind of picture a playground web where kids are climbing all over it and they can go in a million different directions and they can stop and hang out and rest. They can change directions, they can hang upside down. That's what we should be using to think about ambition, because yes, we can be ambitious for power and status and money, and those are all fine, but we can also be ambitious for connection or joy or creativity or impact. And we can shift and change throughout the course of our lives. And so often what I see happen with motherhood is it's a pivot point, not out of the career force and not away from ambition, but to a different type of ambition. And it changes again and again throughout our lives, sometimes reflective of our children's changing and sometimes reflective of other things. But there's so much more room then to hold ambition and motherhood together when we think of it that way.
And you just said the different style and different type of ambition in motherhood. What do you mean by that? And what's the journey that you think then that women may go on and how it changes?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that motherhood is really clarifying because we no longer have time
I
for,
know, I always look at busy people that are single or without kids, and no disrespect, I sometimes do laugh.
right, right. I think with motherhood, I mean, motherhood is a massive identity shift, right? And I've been studying the transition to motherhood since for 20 years, since before I became a mother. And when I first started talking about it, we didn't have language in psychology. You know, I think in recent years we've heard the term matrescence, right? And that's come up a lot, and paralleling motherhood to adolescence in terms of just the sweeping nature of the changes. But when I started doing this work, we didn't have that. That term did not exist. We didn't even have the term at all until like 2015 in terms of how psychology was using it. And so it changes your brain, it changes your body, it changes your social world, it changes your psychological world. And it's almost impossible to go through that level of sweeping change without questioning, what am I doing with my life to some extent? And so motherhood kind of forces that question out of time, exhaustion, shifting priorities. But I think what happens is we see that shift, and the historical label of it has been, now she's less ambitious, right? Or motherhood is where ambition goes to die. And what I see from my chair is that, in fact, women often become more ambitious, and they are more clear in that ambitious, but they will not tolerate wasting their time, and they will not tolerate environments that are making them feel awful or less than. And they're not getting the support that they need in order to show up at work well, while also raising kids.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that. I actually found that once I became a mum, I actually felt that I had more clarity and purpose in my career than beforehand. Before, I felt like I was in the middle of the ocean trying to find who I was, my identity in the workplace. I kind of didn't really feel like I fitted in anywhere, and I've got quite a diverse background, but then once I became a mum, I found that, right, I understand why I'm working, who I'm working for. I actually felt a shift in quite a positive way of actually that clarifying purpose of what you talk about. And for me, it was quite profound, particularly going back. And the return to work, of course, was always a transition of going through that re-identity of who I am. But once I came out the other end, I actually have to say I probably had more confidence. And you're right, less time wasting, less BS. And I don't want to put up with the crap in an organization, but now I know, okay, this is what I'm about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, it's kind of becomes an iterative process, right? I mean, I would say prior to having kids, I was someone that was extremely ambitious and really for achievement, right? Like that was really one of the big drivers for me. And so then I had my second kid, and that was really the thing that started to unravel it for me. And I left, and that was such an identity hurdle in terms of ambition. That's, I think, when all of this started brewing for me in terms of thinking about ambition differently, because I was working at Harvard, I'd gotten my doctorate, I had my dream job, and I had like the name brand recognition to go with it, right? And that achievement part of me was like, check, this is great. And I left because they would not allow me to go at all part-time. And I knew it was no longer going to fit for our family. And so I started a private practice, which was just me, right? Seeing some clients. And that was not fulfilling this like achievement oriented part of myself. And I had to grapple with, well, can I still be someone who is ambitious and work in a different way? And eventually I kind of figured out, yes, because I can be ambitious for connection and time with my kids at this stage, and also for deep work with my clients and really making a difference in a few people's lives, right? And now as I'm doing this book, my kids are slightly older. My ambition has really shifted to impact, right? And how can I serve so many more people more broadly with this book and with my message and with speaking? And I still do the client facing work, of course, but it is just another shift or almost a new layer of ambition that I'm embracing right now. And we get to do that over and over and over again throughout our lives.
Yeah, certainly. Is there a process that you go through, I guess, iteratively to, I guess, reanalyze, reflect on where you are and to have that, as you said before, now you're more focused on impact. Is there a process or something, as I said, that you go through to, I guess, articulate what that looks like for you?
Yeah, I think for me, it is that I've learned that I need space to intellectually play. And that was something I had to really work to name again when my kids were little and I was hearing these messaging. I mean, again, remember, so my oldest is 17. When my first couple were little, there was a lot of messaging around working is bad for your kids and that you are robbing your children of you. And so when I left work, I almost like didn't give myself that intellectual play space. And since then I've learned that work is not bad for your kids, right? We can talk about all the data where it
Yeah.
can be wonderful for your kids, but also that I need that, right? In order to show up as a good mom, I also have to have space where I'm intellectually playing with ideas in some way, shape, or form. And a lot of times that's been taking a class, getting a certification. Learning is really a value of mine that is very deep seated. And so following my interest and my joy and letting that open up. And usually it's only like I'm halfway into something before I realize, oh, now I'm ambitious for this thing.
Yeah.
I don't even know that writing the book was I'm ambitious for impact, therefore I will write a book. I think it was I kind of want to write a book. This sounds really appealing. I think I have something to say. And then it became clear through the process of doing that of like, oh, part of what I'm trying to do here is serve more widely.
Yeah, as what you said, following the breadcrumbs.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So are you finding as well through some of your conversations that there is a bit of a gap between where I guess maybe women think they are and where they want to be, and how are they closing potentially that gap?
In terms of their like level at work?
Their level of ambition, I guess their identity, of understanding who they are now that they're a mum, particularly if they're just returning back into work after parental leave.
I think that they don't, I don't see it that they are labeling it as a gap so much as a question mark or a feeling of like, who am I now? Right. Like that a little bit like the ground is shaky underneath their feet. And
Yeah.
I think we pay a lot, we're paying more attention. I shouldn't say we pay a lot, we're paying more attention to the transition back to work. And I certainly do that and help companies do that better by doing parental leave coaching and manager training. But then we kind of forget about moms, right? Like it's almost this view of like they're back. We get through the logistic hurdles of returning to work, and then we forget that there's still a huge identity shift that they are undergoing. And again, that continues, right? Because parenting an infant is different than parenting a toddler. It's different than parenting school age children. And so I think that's where I see a gap from externally, right? Is that we aren't helping women take the time that they need to ask essentially, what do I want to be when I grow up now that I'm a mom? And that's one of the questions I love to help people answer because there's so much like new stuff to play with. It's fun and freeing if you let it be, right? And so that's where we start digging into things like, what is the messaging I've received around what I'm supposed to want? And what do I actually want now? How have my values and my priorities shifted? And then like, if I can name it, how can I take the steps to go after it in a sustainable way?
Yeah. And so what are some of those questions, is what you said about asking yourself about who you are now? Are there some things or questions that you would recommend people even get a computer or a book or something and actually sit down and I guess maybe help ask those clarifying questions?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is really tricky is that so often than not, when we start to ask those questions, there's about 3,000 layers of shoulds on top of them.
I think should be a swear word.
Yeah. And so really there's like pre-work we have to do. And to do that, I use the analogy of a closet clean out. And so it's silly, but stick with me for a minute. Like if you're cleaning out your closet, right, you put everything out on the bed and you figure out what you're going to keep. You kind of label it, right? You're like, oh, that itchy sweater from grandma, I actually have never worn that and it's really uncomfortable, so it goes in the giveaway bin. Or that pair of jeans, now that I have had babies, is never going to fit me again. Get rid of it, right? But this t-shirt feels like me and I love it and I'm going to keep it, right? And so we only put the things back in the closet that fit, that are comfortable, and that feel like us. Because if I wear clothes that don't feel like me, they may fit, but I'm going to be kind of tugging him all day, right? Like if I were to put on, I don't know, like an 80s power suit, I would probably feel pretty uncomfortable, even if it theoretically fit. So we've got to have that last piece of like, does this feel true to me?
Yeah.
And so we can do that with our identity. And the version of that is to basically write down every role that you play in your life: mother, sister, wife, friend, leader, community member, etc. Right? Like you can be very creative with how you label these. But then you go through and you write down what are all of the expectations for every single one of these. And I find that this exercise could take hours because it's kind of like there's just layer upon layer upon layer of expectations. And usually what happens is I have women, in my group, this is one of the very first things we do. And they start with it, and there's kind of an initial round. And then throughout the week, they kind of think of more and more and more and more things to add. But once you've listed all of those, then you want to go back and you want to say, does this fit? Right? And who did I get this from? And those are really important. And so maybe it is, my fourth grade teacher said something about how I should be a scientist. And so I've really held on to that, but I don't like science, right? I mean, whatever it is, or my mom didn't work. So all of my expectations about motherhood are from an at-home mom in the, whatever decade I was raised in. And that's completely inapplicable to me if I'm a working mom, right? And so you go through and you label, and some of the expectations are just gender socialization, and social media, quite honestly, has a huge impact here, right? So we start to say, where did I get them from? Is this even a trustworthy source? And then also, does it actually fit, right? It might be like, that's a great value for someone else, and it doesn't have to be a value for me. And the only things that go back in our like identity closet are the ones that fit our lives right now. And then there's more space to start grappling with the question of who am I and what do I want? And that's a little bit of that trial and error, and seeing, just like you would go to the store and try on new clothes, you might experiment and say, oh, does this activity feel like me? Does this boundary feel like me? How do I respond to these things as I'm going through my days?
That's a lot in that. That would be no doubt quite emotional for some people.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that it's really easy for me to talk you through the process. And usually it's quite a deep, revealing process.
Very deep, yeah.
And especially I love doing it as a group, right? I run a group for working moms. And what happens is they feed each other. I mean, in a positive way, right? It's like people are labeling things that they didn't even know they were carrying, but then someone else hears that. And then there's kind of a group permission to name it, but also then group permission to let it go. And I think women just need a whole lot more permission in their lives. Yeah. Full stop.
Yes, I 100% agree. Do you find that in that environment that people and like women are like, oh, I'm going to say this, but then actually other women also then go, yeah, I feel exactly the same way. And it's that safe space that, because there's also so much of motherhood, and even as what we're talking around ambition, that you feel that it's quite individualized, that, oh, I'm going to feel this, but I'm not necessarily going to verbalize it because I don't know how other people feel about it. And everyone's got an opinion. As you say, society has so many expectations. But as soon as you actually speak up and say, oh, I'm feeling X, and people go, oh, I'm feeling the same way, you actually feel seen and heard as well in motherhood. And for me, that's so much of actually finding that community of going, oh, I thought it was just me that thought this, but it turns out a lot of others are as well.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing I love about doing group work is exactly that experience, right? And I talk in my book about pretending, which is this concept where many of us are walking around and everybody's just seeing a veneer, right? That kind of shiny outside layer, and assuming that everybody else's veneer is the deep truth. But we feel like, well, I'm the only one that's kind of a hot mess internally. And sometimes we're even pretending to ourselves, right? And saying, oh, I'm fine. I'm going to ignore the fact that I'm so exhausted I can't see straight, or that I'm actually miserable. There's a lot of pretending going on in the motherhood space around everything is okay. And when you get women in a room together and somebody takes even a little teeny step towards vulnerability, and sometimes that person is me as the leader to kind of voice it, it just comes crumbling down. And women have that exact experience you labeled of like, oh yeah, me too. And to have a whole room of women or a whole Zoom of women say, yeah, me too, is so validating and so empowering because it reduces the shame, right? All of a sudden we don't have shame about our feelings. We're allowed to just have our feelings, and then we can move through them.
Yeah, because there's so much of, I guess, with that comes mum guilt as well, that we're made to, as what you spoke about earlier, you know, we're made to feel that we're not allowed to have our dreams and our ambitions because now we are a mum. But as what you've been saying, we can, and also not to, you know, put baby in the corner is what they say in Dirty Dancing, but actually, no, you can be front and center, and everyone can actually play a lead role.
Yeah, and not only can you, it's good for your kids,
Yes.
right? The best thing we can do for our kids is be fulfilled and happy as mothers, because then we show up differently for them. And if our entire lives revolve around only our children, that's actually a lot of pressure to put on your kid, not directly, but kind of implicitly, because then all of a sudden they feel responsible for your happiness. Right. And that's not something, that's not a burden we want our kids to carry. We need to figure out how do I kind of fulfill myself and fill my own cup so that I can serve them, so that I can give them the freedom to go off and do what they want. And because I want to role model it for them as well. Right. When they see mom doing this, then they actually learn that they get to do it too.
100%. It's so important. And I guess with you having 3 sons and a daughter, it's so important to role model not only for your daughter on the opportunities as a female, but also for your sons, no doubt, of look at the opportunities of what women can be doing.
Absolutely. I think that's really important, right? Like one of my boys, he wants to be a dad. Like that's his main goal. And I think that makes me so happy, right? Because then I've done something right. If I've given them all permission to think about what they want to do and to see it role modeled that women get to pursue their own lives and their own excitement and all of that. And also that there's a lot of teamwork in the home around supporting that.
Yeah. And so what does it look like as a woman? Like paint us a picture of a woman that's gone through that work, asked herself those deep questions, and then now she's showing up as her true and confident self and is owning being ambitious. What does that picture look like?
It's not like beautiful, right? It's still messy. That's the thing I think I want to own. Like there is no such thing as a stress-free life. If I was able to wave my magic wand and give people stress-free lives, I would be like an incredibly rich woman. But B, some of the struggle is actually where growth happens. So it's not inherently bad to have struggle. I certainly still have days that are crazy. I was just saying to another mom, you know, we're on our last week of school coming up this week, that I feel a little bit like we are limping to the finish line in our house. Like the fridge died, the car needs to be serviced. Like we are barely getting through, but there's joy alongside of that. And I don't feel like this is happening because I'm failing as a mom or failing at my job. I just know that we have a lot going on right now. And that's part of parenting for tweens and teens. And so there's not the shame along with it. And there's no sense of, oh, I should probably quit my job to make this easier. It's just, this is a really busy time. We'll come up for air on the other side. I'm still going to take the time that I need to go for my walks that I really enjoy, or, to play a board game with my kids or whatever. That it's this kind of, again, there's a lot of permission, there's flexibility, and there is a sense of kind of deep knowing that I am doing the best I can at things that are important to me. And someone else might come in and be like, yeah, but your house is a mess. And I would say, okay, that's not actually my right. Yes, true. That's not the thing that I'm focusing on right now. And we don't all have to have the same values and focus on the same things.
I think that is so true. And I think, thank you so much for saying that, because it's really validating and it really gives that permission slip. So if you're listening, I think it's great to hear that you're still going to have stress. You're still going to have areas of your life that are going to be this hot mess. You're never going to have everything perfect and anywhere, because there's no such thing as perfect, as we know. So I have to say thank you for saying that, because it's so validating to know that there is no perfect answer. There's no, as you say, silver bullet. But I think it's really great that, yeah, we're in times of busyness and we're going to come up for air when we can and things. So, yeah, thank you for that. I think it was so validating to hear.
I think that the flip side is, I can just think of I've had a few clients where the idea of the messy house was like painful to them for lots of reasons. And that was actually one of their values, was like, I can't play with my kids until the dishes are done. Does that make me a bad mom? And I've kind of said, absolutely not, right? Again, what do you need to do to take care of you so that you can show up the best you can for them? If that is something that's really important to you and makes you feel safe and more content, then absolutely that gets to be one of the things you focus on, right? It's like there isn't a right answer. It's just the right answer for you.
I think that's so true. And there's no, every family is different. There's no single way to do it. And as you said, it's whatever works for you. So just finally, Anne, is there anything else, any hints, tips, or amazing strategies? I know you've got your book, but that you just want to share with listeners on ambition and motherhood, but also being able to navigate motherhood and also having a career?
I mean, two things. I'll cheat and give you two. So one is,
amazing.
I just always, every time I speak with moms, I like to share the data about time and quality versus quantity, because I think as a working mom, there is a particular level of guilt about not spending, quote, enough time with our kids. This was a huge thing I had to work through.
Even society tells us this as well.
Right. And we now have data that tells us the opposite, right? That it is actually not about the quantity of time that we spend with our kids, but the quality, right? And so in one huge study, for example, they looked at kids between the ages of 3 and 11 and found the amount of time their mother spent with them was irrelevant. What was important was the emotional climate of the home. What that means is, if you are spending 10 minutes a day with your kid and you are focused on them and you are present with them for that time and you delight in them for that time, that's enough, right? And that's actually far better than spending a couple hours distracted, crabby, and resentful, right? And so if you are spending time away from them because you are filling your bucket or you are pursuing things that are important to you, whether that is because they light you up or you want to change the world for them or whatever, then do those things, because what matters is how you're showing up with your kids, not how much you are showing up with your kids. And I think that data can be really freeing, because so often, again, we are told, people say horrible things to working mothers about, why would you let someone else raise your children? I mean, people have said them all to me at various points. And yet, really what matters is, how are you showing up when you are with your kids? That's it. And so that's number one, just like a data piece to throw in there. And the other thing I always that kind of piggybacks off, is that if you take nothing away from this entire conversation that we've had as you're listening, the kernel that I want you to remember is that you matter, right? So often we are told as mothers that we are irrelevant and that our kids are the most important things and that we have to, quote, put them first. But the reality is there's a bazillion ways that we can put our kids first. And a huge part of that is actually living your own life and asking what you want, because your ambition matters to you and to your kids and to all of us in this world. We all benefit from you pursuing the things that light you up.
Oh, amazing. Oh, I love those two. They're so cool. So quality over quantity. So if you're having those moments of guilt of thinking, I need to be spending more time with my kids because, as you say, inverted commas, don't say the word should. Ban yourself from saying that. But just remember back to this conversation and say, Anne said it's quality over quantity, and just feeling those emotional cuts for both yourself and your kids. And sometimes that can also be a physical hug, doing the basics. Sometimes they actually don't need big, extravagant gestures. Sometimes they just want you maybe to kick a footy, play some Lego, play Barbies. It doesn't actually have to be sometimes anything grand, does it?
Yes. No, absolutely right. We don't have to do anything to make childhood magical. It's magical because it's childhood.
Yeah. And then also I love that last part of just looking after yourself, and it's actually okay. This is the permission slip. So if you're needing an episode and that to actually give you permission slip to look after yourself, this is the one. And Anne has given it to you. The data backs it up, which is great to hear. So thank you so much, Anne. Where can people find out more about you, your book? When's it coming out?
Yes,
and
absolutely. So you can get the book anywhere books are sold, but if you go on my website, which is drannwelsh.com, and then find the link to the book, there's also some amazing pre-order bonuses. The book is coming out August 6th, but if you order it before August 6th, you can get a book called A Day in Her Life, which talks through lots of different working mothers' actual days and how they make it work as a way of like thinking about what do I want in my life. There's some scripts for hard conversations, like how to bring up the mental load with your partner, how to ask for a promotion. And then there's also some guided meditations that are just a minute or two, little snacks that you can fit into your life. They're really valuable as a mom. So those are all some bonuses you get if you order the book ahead of time. And then if people want to follow me on social, I'm Dr. Ann Welsh, both Instagram and LinkedIn.
Amazing. And I remember seeing on LinkedIn recently, you were sharing a little snippet of the day in the life of that. I think it was a doctor or someone. I was like, oh, this is great. So also what I loved about that, I know we're digressing a little bit, but it was actually really good that you're actually sharing about how we're not just talking about, oh, there's this mum and, you know, she's a doctor and has her kids and things like that. But you're actually giving a day in the life, which is actually making it real and going, oh, okay, this is something quite tangible that probably even if you're not in the medical industry or you are, you can actually then relate to as well. So I think that was a great addition. So thanks for that.
Yeah. It was a really fun project to do, to interview lots of different women with different jobs and different types of kids, different types of families, and to just celebrate how every woman is finding her own way through it. And again, it's not one size fits all, but you can kind of look at what these women are doing and saying, what does this inspire in me? What do I want to take? What do I want to ignore? Is there anything I want to do differently because of how I've seen all of these women doing?
Yeah. So just quickly, if I'll put you on the spot now in 60 seconds, what's a day in the life look like for you?
Well, I would say a little chaotic in the morning, as is per usual, I think, with anyone with children. But I get up, I exercise before my kids get up. Then we do the lunch packing and the backpack packing and the 300 reminders about what people have to remember to do that day, find the missing homework, negotiate breakfast and all of those things. And then I get the kids to school. And then I start my, quote, paid work day at around 8 o'clock. And then we kind of do the reverse at, 5 o'clock in the evening. Kids have all sorts of activities. We check in as a family about what's going on the next day and try to have at least a little bit of time together over dinner to connect and just enjoy each other's company.
I love it. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for today's chat, Anne. I've loved it. And there's so many gems of gold. So I hope that at the end of this, you're feeling a lot more validated and certainly knowing that, this is your permission slip on how you want to run your life, but also some great questions to ask yourself to actually sit back and reflect, well, who am I and actually what do I want and what means the most to me? So thank you so much, Anne, and best of luck with the book.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure.